So before I started this talk off, I actually wanted to play David Hasselhoff's True Survivor. So I think if you've made it this far in DerbyCon, you definitely are one of those. Because I've been to all 7, and I have never stayed this late. This is actually the first time. And I blame all of you all because it was really hard to get tickets. So then it was like, now I'm stuck, either following Twitter accounts or submitting the paper. So, that's kind of how this all happened. But it's good to be here. I'm pretty excited. This is my first time speaking at DerbyCon, even though I'm a Louisville resident. I really like this community. I think, obviously, what Dave's done around here, especially with like the local ICSA chapter, those guys, they've done some amazing stuff. And I'll tell you that, me being able to present here, I've heard people use the saying from Isaac Newton all the time, standing on the shoulder of giants. I definitely feel that way. This conference being here, my military career, all these things, I've just been surrounded by great people. So, things like this conference, keep coming to it, stay connected. I hope if you're a first timer here that you really enjoyed it. Louisville treated you well. And, we look forward to you coming back. Hopefully you submit a paper if you can't get a ticket. All right, so to kick off the talk, the first thing I want to explain is every time I told somebody the title of my talk, they asked if it was about Metallica. And it's like, it's not about Metallica. It's about Ghost in the Shell. So this is the context of what I mean by Ghost in the Shell. So I can't assume everybody's seen it, but in Ghost in the Shell, there's a project. It's a government project. It's called 2501. And that project, the AI could start to tell and gain sentience. So it started to tell that it had feelings. It could tell that the government, what it was doing, and then it started to interpret that maybe the government might want to get rid of it, right? So it started taking actions to kind of protect itself, right? So in a way, what I'm doing a bit of a spin on is that in Ghost in the Shell, you have AI is trying to protect itself, and you kind of see the humanity of AI. In my talk, it's more about humanity and our concern over AI and what it means from my perspective, the first person opinions I've had from some of my studies and some of my background. So with that, as Joe says, who are these clowns? So for myself, I'm Michael Robinson. I'm a Cyber Operations Warrant Officer, 175th Cyber Protection Team. I do cyber things for the DoD as well. I've worked in the federal government. I work in Fortune 50 aspects. So why do I think I'm in a good position to speak to this? I'm finishing my master's in data science, so I've gotten to see a bit of the academic aspect of this. I've had the luxury of mentoring dozens of analysts in this field, all the way from defensive teams in the military to defensive teams in the Fortune 50 space. And I have seen through a lot of those relationships some of the human bias and some of the benefits that I think we could gain from AI and some of the gaps we still probably will have.
All right, so good afternoon. Thanks for making it this far. Again, Michael covered most of the things. I apologize for my voice. I've got the con cold or something. I'm not sure what it is. But like Michael said, we really appreciate you guys coming to see us and putting up with our opinion for about 50 minutes. We're both just amateur academics, and we really do just learn a lot from everybody else. We've been kind of greedy, honestly, throughout our careers, and we haven't produced much. So this is the start of that, of us trying to give back. But my background, right now I'm a lead analyst in a SOC for a local logistics company. I'll let you guess which one. I've had 9 years as a military analyst, as a cyber intel analyst in the local Air National Guard. And the reason why I have a strong opinion about these things is my job was previously taken by a robot. I was a weatherman in the Air National Guard, and they figured out that the models got so good, they didn't need so many of us. So they centralized all of it to a few Air Force bases. So what are we going to talk about today? Let's get right into it. Our common enemies. This is the first section, right? So when we talk about our common enemies, these are things that we both do badly, that machines do badly, that we as analysts do badly. The first thing is complexity of system design. So I work at a place that has it's about a 100-year-old company with 400,000 endpoints in 220 countries with unimaginable amount of various protocols and applications, spoken languages, programming languages. Neither machines nor humans can handle that properly, right? Neither one of our ability or skill sets work well with that complex of a system. So with value orientation, neither one of us work very well in situations where we haven't been given a goal, a defined thing to do, right? And then we're just given freedom to operate. We generally end up spinning our wheels for wasting cycles, basically. The adversarial space, of course, the red teamers out there will, they know that we're looking for them, right? The hackers, the bad guys, they know that we're trying to use machine learning. They're using machine learning. We're trying to find them. They're trying to avoid us. So that's also things that both humans and computers are bad at, is finding things that don't want to be found. Data generation is multi-purpose, non-standard. That goes back to the first part, right? That's more complexity. So even though a machine learning model might be designed for one situation, as soon as that situation changes, right, or as soon as it gets outside of that scope, it's not standard anymore, that model no longer works. In the lack of scientific research, what we found is that lately there's been a lot of like cool research done with machine learning. They've beaten a lot of video games, right? That's basically where we're at, is that Elon Musk beat Dota, and there's been some guys beat Mario, and then of course IBM beat chess, 20 years ago. But there hasn't been a model that's been good at all three of those things. As new video games come out, they kind of beat these things. But like we were talking about at lunch today, we'd like to see a machine learning model that can beat Eve, right? A complex, system that's constantly changing with spies and I don't know much about Eve, but apparently it's pretty complex. All right, so I get to be the bad guy today. So I get to talk about all the things that machines are good at, well, mostly, and I get to try and scare you all into thinking that the Terminator is going to take your jobs, which isn't very accurate, but that's my job, is to scare you all into thinking that AI is dangerous. So let's go on to the next part here. All right, so is your job already automated? Right, that's the first sign that that you should be threatened by AI. Right, is your job? Are you a level 1 triage analyst in a SOC? Do you operate on a playbook that a machine could easily be done? Is your job dependent on making decisions based on images, as in radiologists even? Right, there's some fields, and we'll talk about this a little more. Doctors are one of those fields that's really being targeted by AI, whether it's Watson or whatever. AI is very good, and machines are very good at making decisions based on images that they have lots of data on. They can tell if a bone is broken, right? You can teach a computer to do that just based on an x-ray. Pathologists, right, that make decisions based off of what they see in a microscope. Is this a new disease? Is this an old disease? Like, you can classify these things as false positive, true positive, and those are things that machines are really good at. So, minor physical contact. So if your job does not involve, dealing with customers, and even that's kind of arguable whether AI is good at that or not, or if you don't have to adjust to constantly changing physical environment, right? Even the Army's been working on this for a little while. They have that dog-looking machine that's supposed to change everything. That was like 5 years ago they developed this thing. I haven't seen it out anywhere. Maybe the Army guys can help me on that. I don't think that's not running around on base anywhere, is it? You have one at your house. Okay, sorry. So we'll ignore that one. But if you physically work with, patients, or, if you're constantly like, the thing that saves radiologists at this point, which, it's debatable as well, is that they have to move their patients and they have to comfort them and to sit in certain ways for the x-rays, right? Pathologists, they don't quite have that. Does your job mostly deal with paperwork or images? We'll talk more about real estate agents, right? Can anybody make an argument for why real estate agents still exist? Right? Like, I get way better results, and I love my real estate agent. She's awesome. But I get way better results from like Zillow than she can ever provide to me. Is your job answering data-dependent questions? So we're already way behind on this, and we're all very aware of this, that machines are better at stock trading, things like that. And they have some weaknesses, and Like for instance, I went to a talk at Black Hat, and it was actually during the training. It was a machine learning class, and the guy that taught the class was one of the original kind of designers of bots that could do trading on the New York Stock Exchange. And what he talked about was in 2013, I'm sure you all remember this, Associated Press, their Twitter got hacked. They put out a tweet that said there was an explosion at the White House and Obama was injured. And what that caused was about $136 billion in stock loss because all these bots that were very trained at looking at social networking to anticipate stock price sold tons of stock. And that was one of the main weaknesses, right? So people saw this and were like, well, clearly bots aren't good at trading. But, it was just an interesting thing that happened. And there's a lot of questions that haven't been asked about this. Like, when all the stock was sold, was it bought by the same people, right? Was there anybody buying while the stuff was being sold, right? Could there be malicious connection here? Did somebody know about the bots and was trying to make, billions of dollars off of them? And that's a possibility. But that's just an idea that's somebody taking advantage of something that they know, this formal model that's buying and selling stock, just taking advantage of a machine learning model that isn't prepared for an adversary. And that's something we haven't seen. All right, so on to the next. Doing quantitatively based analysis. And we do a lot of this now on defense, right? So in a SOC, you do a lot of quantitative based analysis. And what we found is that it's usually best when a human works with a machine, right? That's how it works best. It's not humans working by themselves. It's not machines working by themselves. It's a human using a machine learning model to operate. I was thinking about an interesting thing earlier that it works really bad the other way around, like in fantasy football. Like when machines are making decisions based on human analysis, it's terrible. Like I just lost 6 points on my fantasy football team today because Baltimore was supposed to do well. That didn't work out. And I blame the machines, right? So it's their fault that I put Baltimore in. So is consistency critical? Is insurance claims adjusting, financial stress testing, all these things are data-based jobs. Machines are really good at database things. So if you're listening to this and you're answering yes to any of these questions, just prepare yourself for the introduction of machines into your job that are going to change the way you work, right? Judging crimes and issuing punishments, that one's really interesting because what they found is that they're able to train machines to make more consistent judgments in the criminal system. Does that mean we won't need judges anymore? I mean, that depends on who you ask. In my opinion, no, but it's there's a lot of subjectivity in the judicial system. But it would be interesting to see a judge using machine learning to augment his decision making, right? And those sort of things we need to think about. So writing database narratives. Now this one's interesting. This one's what I blame my fantasy football losses on, is that sports writing is just database journalism, right? And machines are very good at it. If your job is database narratives, if you're scanning networks and then writing a story to tell a CISO about why, some application owner needs to patch something, right? If that's your job, then prepare to be replaced by AI. That's not a job that a machine can't do. And then there's some interesting things here too, right? Because machines are also very bad at correlations. So there's this interesting book called Spurious Correlations, and I encourage you to go look at it. It makes a lot of data, assumptions about things, like the more Nicolas Cage makes movies, the more deaths in swimming pools there are. Well, clearly, I don't know if it's clear or not. The data says that more people drown when Nick Cage makes movies. I don't know if these people are watching, Nick Cage movies in the pool and they get so excited that they drown or something, but it seems to me that that's not really a very fair correlation, right? So those are the types of things that humans could go like, well, that's really dumb, but machines will think like, oh, the data says that's correct, so there's some story there. All right, do you have well-defined rules? And this kind of goes back to this level 1 triage analyst, right? They work off playbooks, right? So it's very defined. They say, hey, if this comes from the PCI segment, if this alert fires in the PCI segment, it's a high alert, it's critical, right? Those are the type of things that machines do. They could say like, oh, it came from this part of the network, make it critical. We don't need triage analysts if you have well-defined automated rules. You're just wasting, thousands of dollars of your company, depending on how much the model costs, but that's a different debate. The cost of auditing versus the cost of replacing people. Maybe if you can pay somebody, $20,000 a year or something to do your level 1 triage, then it's worth it. But tax preparation and auditing, that's more data-driven jobs, basically. If you're a red teamer, right, and I don't want to say that I'm on the blue side, so my bias is obviously there. But on the red teamer, a lot of nowadays you're fighting machine learning. You're trying to get around it, right? You're trying to beat the naive Bayesian spam filters and things like that. Machines are better at that. You're a machine trying to beat a machine, right? It's much better at knowing what will get by itself than you will. And you guys are smart, and I know that because you're here at DerbyCon. I don't know if it's maybe debatable because you're here this late. But like Michael, I've never been here this late either. I don't know who's left at this point. I don't know what goes on at closing ceremony. Somebody could let me know if I should stay for that or not. It'd be awesome. But this is where I'll let Michael take over. So I was the bad guy, and I hope you're all scared because that's my job. But Michael's here to make you feel better. So I'll let him take over. Thank you.
Yeah, no. See, I do mix it up. All right, so we just covered different aspects that, honestly, most industries are asking this question. Where's my job? How's technology going to impact it? And in a way, AI is the thing that kind of is the hot button topic. So in a way, what I want to do is I want to make sure you understand why you are different than the machine and the advantages you have. But it's also smart to know your enemy. That's why you come to DerbyCon. You want to know what the red team's doing or you want to know what the blue team's doing, right? So it's good to realize and be able to react to what machines possibly are good at. So for humans, some of the things that humans naturally are good at are things such as pattern matching. So yesterday I listened to Ben 10 talk. Ben 10 recognized he was doing something and then realized I'm doing something similar to Sub T. Maybe I'm going to use my relationship, use this pattern matching, create something new, okay? That's something humans can do. Machines by their nature are developed by developers. So a lot of it is if you use any kind of like Metasploit framework, if you like to use, MITRE's strategy for building a SOC, if you like to use these, different kind of frameworks, well, those are all designed by humans, right? So humans get to influence and interject that with their creativity, find patterns, and evolve things. The best example I had from this about the irrationality of humans, but why that sometimes really works out for us, is we got to talk to Gary Kasparov when we were at DEF CON, and Gary had a slide, and we criticized him, like, you took our talk. This is what we were going to talk about. But if you don't know, Gary Kasparov is a grand master in chess, played IBM, and in his slides he had Han Solo and C-3PO. And why he picked that out was, during that scene, C-3PO pointed out to Han Solo the irrationality about what he was about to do, starting to tell him the odds, why a computer would never do this, right? And Han Solo just goes, shut up, I got this, right? And sometimes humans do that. And honestly, sometimes it actually really works out. Sometimes we even design systems that way. So if you think of like autopilot in planes, right, the systems are designed that the human should never have to interject into the flight plan. But if something happens, that's where the human is expected to be creative and figure out why it all failed and recover the system. So those are things that humans are really good at. Another aspect of it is if you can teach somebody a certain model and they can apply it to different aspects of life. And that's something that computers have been very bad at, that it takes so much effort to build something that if a new problem set comes up, humans can really easily, if you say, PowerShell is the new thing, right? It's like, sounds like the world's spinning. It's like, I got it. It's like, this is, you have veterans who are like, this is nothing new. We have to evolve, right? But computers don't work that way. It takes more time. Things that machines are really good at are things that humans are really bad at. And that is discipline, that is being able to, keep an attention span beyond 5 to 10 minutes. Bias is a huge one. And then the aspects of bias, these are things that machines really, really will start to uncover challenges of human analysis that we've had. So if you look at like aspects of confirmation bias or status quo bias, and there's a whole litany of different biases, but ultimately what it all rounds out to be is that humans like to be comfortable in making their decisions, and some of our decision making are influenced by things that aren't prevalent to the problem themselves. So if you can think of an analyst or pen tester has some results, has something that may be uncomfortable, a machine would not be influenced by that on communicating exactly what it was. But humans may take fear into account. They may take a promotion into account. They may say, I'm not going to disclose this. I'll wait till I go to DerbyCon and I'll present it there. Right? We make rational decisions outside of the problem's context. And those are things that, for specific problems, we probably don't want to happen. We don't want analysts to, be taking too many fireball shots and then come into work on Monday and not be able to perform, right? The machine, I don't have to worry about that, right? So those are things that machines are really good at that humans just aren't. So with that, talking about, the benefits and the negatives of each, what can you do? So when Joe went through those slides, if, about half of those questions he proposed, do you do data-based narratives? Is consistency, does that matter? Then what are you expected to do? What should you do? If you have kids, it's like, what do you want your kids to learn to do? It's like, how are we going to make sure that people have jobs? And you start getting into some of the articles about this. So what I'm going to tell you is these are 5 things that people do now, that have done in the past, and will always do in the future, and it's just how we respond to technology. And at times, you just got to realize that it's okay to be uncomfortable. I'm just going to have to adapt. So the first aspect is called stepping up. So the thing that you're expected to do, this is more big picture thinking at a macro level, right? So if AI is going to come in and could solve a problem, somebody who's stepping up is seeing that out of all the controls that I have, and AI is going to solve this, how is it going to ripple affect other aspects? How is the consumption of it going to impact things downstream? How are people going to handle it? How would the SOC handle it? How would, my red team handle, and you can tell that at things it takes time, but I'm sure if we go back in time when things like the Metasploit framework came out, there were people who were probably pretty negative about it. They're like, I don't see where this fits in. I'm good at this. I don't need this. I don't need to use your code. I'm elite. And then time shows that these frameworks, if you can recognize it and you can step above it and figure out how it fits into your program, that higher level, those are things that you can do and you can catch on early. Another thing you can do is to step aside. Stepping aside means you come here and present about AI. You write books about AI. You start explaining to people that when AI performs its job, you're the person that goes and presents those findings to somebody. A good aspect of this is financial advisors are really finding themselves in this spot, that models are much better at taking inputs and saying, Joe, this is kind of how your finances are. These are recommendations. But Joe doesn't want to hear from a computer that that's the recommendation. There is a personal side. Some of this, people, have stress. They are risk averse. They're afraid. They don't want to, they don't know. And I'm sure you've had this, if your cable company is like, I got a problem, and it pops up the little bot, and it's like, that's the last thing I want to talk to you right now. It's like, I'm mad, my Mayweather fight's not streaming or whatever. It's like, I want to talk to a person. Well, that exists, and in AI it'll exist as well. Another thing to do is, if you can't beat it, join it. So start stepping in. Start learning how people build these things, and figure out how you can make them better. Usually these kind of jobs are reserved for the people that get in real early and are part of designing the models. But if you get in early enough, while everybody else is losing their job, you still have a job, right? So the way it sounds a little, rough, but that absolutely happens. If you look at the effect of cloud on IT, right? You have a lot of absorption. The people at AWS that built this stuff, they recognize the pattern They start building it, they stepped in, and they're the ones that are retaining their jobs. Another thing you could do is what's called step narrowly. So the best example I have on this one in this field are people who are SCADA experts, right? It's a niche. It takes a lot of research. If people who are good at IT, they might not be good at OT. And the chances of AI in the near term solving that niche problem is much less likely than it's solving general IT's problem. So if you feel like I'm a security analyst, or you can recognize that if you can find a way to, target medical devices, target, Internet of Things, those pivot points, the benefit to you is that most people probably aren't trying to solve those problems right now. You can actually kind of maintain a career AI won't be able to come after yet, because it's got to be able to make money, right? And then the next aspect is stepping forward, and that's seeing the models that have been built and building a whole brand new model. And I'll tell you, this has been probably the things that I've been most interested in my career so far, is being in academia and working with some of these research projects, seeing the difficulties that comes, especially in this industry, on data sets that you can use to train models. There's just not a lot, and a lot of us don't have access to tremendous amounts of data. So me being in the Fortune 50, but then also learning about these modeling gives me this nice hybrid of I can take this and I have a data set at my fingertips, right? So this is where some of these conversations on who will be the best at detecting spam in the next 10 years, and it probably will be Google. Why? Because Google has tremendous amount of data set to train the model, and they have the talent that they can recruit to build those models, right? Where other vendors, if they don't natively have access to that data, it puts them at a disadvantage. So if you like this kind of stuff, you can definitely reach out to me on Twitter. It's in the slide deck. Joe and I will share it. It's Chief Mike and then Joe. These are people that we've leaned on to. This presentation was definitely inspired by the last reference, Only Humans Need Apply, and it talks about this aspect a lot more. Humans are really good at stuff, and I'll tell you that there's a lot of stories about technology and the impact it'll have. And a lot of the times, like we were just talking about at lunch, there are times, like, I'll just tell you two stories real quick because I think we got some time. Yeah, obviously we do. So, my son is playing Mario Kart, and I have a 2-year-old as well, right? And I hand him the controller, and he thinks he's in control, right? And he starts driving. My 2-year-old just drops the controller down, and it has like auto accelerate and auto turn in Mario Kart on Switch now. My 2-year-old, his cart goes from last place to first place by him stop touching it, right? And at times, a lot of times I think that's how we interact with technology is we're pretty afraid of it, and we start getting in its way, and we're trying to hold it back and not recognizing that it can actually free us. So if you look at a lot of the commentary about Elon Musk and Zuckerberg and stuff like that, there is this recognition of, what is technology's impact on us. And I think at times we can definitely be negative about it. The best examples are usually, as Joe brought up for augmentation, is look at ways to augment, right? So orchestration platforms, they augment. Metasploit framework augments. Set from Dave Kennedy augments, right? They're not to replace you, they're to make you better, right? Usually, if the technology is there to replace you, humans will delay, deter, will grab the controller. I have control of this, right? And we'll finish in 5th place, and to them, they did a great job, not realizing they just freed themselves. They could have done more exciting things. Another good resource is definitely Anton. So if your company is looking at UEBA, or if you're looking at, if you're on the red side and you're curious how companies that are doing, they're going to implement UEBA, how it could impact you, definitely start to read some of the gaps some of these technologies have, because it can definitely either help you win the game or help you lose the game. But I will tell you that the stuff is pretty cool. It's incomplete. It's very, very hard to do. I've not had a lot of success. I'm sure somebody eventually will figure it out, and it'll probably be a machine that figures it out. that pretty much wraps up our talk. So I definitely appreciate you all coming out, coming to see us and hearing about these topics. So enjoy, I guess, the end of the conference. You pull up your web history now? Yeah. Let's see what Joe looks into. This is the best part.